Good afternoon and welcome, or should I say, welcome back to our Ask Her series. My name is Aubriana Kimbrough, and I am the program officer at the Washington Area Women's Foundation. We are so glad that you've decided to join us on this Thursday for this special edition of our Ask Her series, Advancing Equity for Asian and Pacific Islander Americans, specifically focusing on women and girls in our region. At the Washington Area Women's Foundation, we are committed to investing in the power and potential of women and girls of color across the Washington, D.C. region. We do this through our grant making, our advocacy, and our deep partnerships. We work to dismantle systematic inequities and expand opportunity from birth to boardroom. A part of that commitment includes listening to and learning from the communities that have too often been pushed to the margins, like Asian and Pacific Islander American women and girls. Across health, safety, policy, and economic justice, Asian, Pacific Islander, and American, let me get that right. Asian and Pacific Islander American women and girls are leading transformative work, and yet their stories are too often overlooked. Their communities remain underfunded, and too many continue to carry the dual burden of discrimination and erasure. So, before we begin and dive deep into these issues, and I'm so excited for conversation today, I just wanted to go over a few housekeeping notes for us. First of all, as always, feel free to engage with us and share your thoughts in the chat during the conversation and if you have any follow-up after the conversation. Secondly, please utilize the Q&A function to submit your questions for our panelists, and we will do our best to address as many as possible during the audience portion of the Q&A. Finally, if today's conversation inspires you, we invite you to support our work at the Women's Foundation by making a contribution through our website at thewomensfoundation.org/askher. As we continue to amplify the needs of our community, we ask that you be a part of this process. Now, without further ado, I would like to hand it over to our moderator and the brand new Chief of Staff at the Washington Area Women's Foundation. We are so lucky to have her, Lakshmi Sridharan. So let's have a great time and kick things off.
Thank you so much, Abriana, and welcome everyone. It's an honor to moderate today's conversation. As Abriana said, I'm Lakshmi Sridharan and the brand new Chief of Staff at the Women's Foundation. And prior to this, I spent 10 years directly in the national APIA advocacy space. So I'm really delighted to introduce my colleagues as our panelists for today, who are brilliant leaders working on the front lines of gender and racial equity. I'll start by saying, unfortunately, Sangyeon Choi-moro, Executive Director of NAPA for the National Asian Pacific American Women's Forum, cannot join us today due to a last-minute unforeseen change in her schedule. So it's my honor to introduce the two panelists we have here today. First is Krittika Ghosh, who is the Executive Director of Asian Pacific Islander Domestic Violence Resource Project, or DVRP. With over 25 years of experience addressing gender-based violence in the US and Canada, Krittika brings a powerful lens as a queer immigrant survivor herself. She has led community engagement, policy work, and program development across North America and has been widely recognized for her leadership, including honors from the City of New York, the Filipino Women's Network, was one of Motherboard Magazine's Person of the Year in 2017, and is the recipient of the 2021 Imagine Stewart Surviving Spirit Award. So welcome, Krittika. And next, we're joined by Sue-Ann Hong, President and CEO of the Center for Asian Pacific American Women, or CAPAW. Sue-Ann brings more than 28 years of corporate leadership experience from State Farm, where she led major teams across tech, claims, and diversity initiatives. She now channels that expertise into advancing AAPI women's leadership through CAPAW, drawing on her deep background in systems change, people management, and multi-state operations. Krittika and Sue-Ann, thank you both so much for being here today, and let's get started. So an opening question to both of you, and I'll start with Krittika. Let's begin by really grounding ourselves in the current moment, which I know is, of course, top of mind for everyone. What drives you in this work? And what's one truth about the lived experience of APIA women and girls that you wish more people understood?
Thank you, Lakshmi. It's lovely to be here on this panel with you and Suan, and congratulations on your new role. And thank you for this question. I believe that the current moment is a very challenging one, where our communities are experiencing greater amounts of xenophobia, racism, anti-Asian violence, and Islamophobia. We have a large number of members of our communities that have precarious immigration status and who are experiencing challenging decisions on whether to reach out for support when experiencing violence. The very identities of our queer and trans communities are being challenged by homophobic and transphobic bills. Women and girls are experiencing backlash and violence from state violence, where our reproductive rights are being challenged, and continued escalated violence in our home and communities, with the false expectations that AAPI survivors don't have spaces to reach out for support. I won't sugarcoat it. The current moment is one that is leading us back in time and is causing deep harm in our communities. As a survivor in this movement with multiple intersectional identities that you mentioned before, and as somebody who leads a team that is mostly composed of survivors, I have to ensure that our own emotional and physical safety at this time as we continue to support those in our communities. What drives me in this work is that we have ancestors, including Grace Lee Boggs, Urvashi Ved, and so many API women in the labor rights movement who have, and the gender-based violence movement who have paved the way for us. We have a history of doing this work and of community mobilizing. Also, we have been in these spaces before as a community and these challenges. I will show my age, but I was a community organizer on post 9/11 hate crimes against South Asians and Muslims back in the day and saw firsthand how our communities came together across movements to oppose state violence. Unfortunately, our API communities have experienced many more instances of state violence, including the Japanese internment camps back in the days. While we have to come out of these moments, due to, I believe we'll come out of these moments due to organizing and movement building. I also think it's important to ensure that we are not burning out as we respond to what seems to be a new emergency in our communities every day. For me, it's taking it one day at a time, putting my energy into what's actually doable for my team and community, and taking care of ourselves as folks who are also impacted by multiple forms of violence ourselves. So I hope that helps answer your question.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kritika. I appreciate you tying the historical record to the current moment and to balancing rapid response with long-term strategy. Thank you. And I'll turn it over to Sue Ann, and I'll repeat the question if that's helpful for everyone. The same question of grounding ourselves in the current moment. And Sue Ann, what drives you in this work, and what is one truth about the lived experience of APIA women and girls that you wish more people understood?
So again, first of all, Krithika, I really have such respect for the work that you do because the work that you do is not just about, direct service. This is emotional. This is hard. This is like trauma. So I really hats off to you and all the work that you're doing in this space. From my perspective, so I grew up in corporate America for over 27 years before I came into the nonprofit world. And the Center for Asian Pacific American Women, specifically, we focus on building women's personal power so they can make change, that they can influence, and they can make a difference in their own communities. The thing that I think about and that drives me, number one, first and foremost, is that I am passionate about development. Let's face it, according to McKinsey and leanin.org, the Women in the Workplace report back in 2024, 1 in 4 women are in C-suite, 1 in 20 women of color, 1 in 50 AA and HPI women. I don't even know if NH and PI are even included in this number of 1 in 50 are in C-suite. What that tells me is that our women are not recognized necessarily as leaders. There's stereotypes that hold us back. The perception that we are quiet and demure, by the way, I don't think neither Kritika and I are quiet or demure. But the point is that is a perception, small in stature, easy to get picked on, right? And when I even think about during COVID, I mean, our women were getting actually physically, there was physical altercation based on the data collected, right? API data. So my thing is, what do we have to do to make sure that our women are not held back because of stereotypes and perceptions versus reality of what they bring to the table? So that's really what drives me, because that I can't accept that personally. And so I am passionate about this work, and we have a long way to go. But you know what? We're every day is you got to put the gloves on and make a difference.
Great. Thank you so much, Sue Ann. And I appreciate you talking about some of the very specific challenges that API women leaders face and how they might be similar to some of what we documented in our report, Thrive as We Lead. So I'm excited to ask you more about that later. So Krittika, I wanted to pose a question to you now. When we talk about safety, especially for immigrant women and LGBTQ plus folks in APIA communities, we really have to rethink and redefine what that actually means. And you talked a little bit about that in the post 9/11 context. But how does DVRP define safety, and how do you help survivors rebuild it for themselves? And I'm going to ask you a two-part question. And so the second part of that is, in particular, over the years, DVRP has really developed many unique strategies for programming that is survivor-led and known for healing justice in particular. So could you speak to how this kind of programming helps redefine and build safety?
Yeah, thank you, Lakshmi. And DVRP, the Asian Pacific Islander Domestic Violence Resource Project, recognizes the multiple ways in which violence manifests itself through intimate partner relationships, systemic violence, including gendered racism and xenophobia. We also recognize that the violence we are responding to is as a result of white supremacy, patriarchy, colonialism, settler colonialism, imperialism, Islamophobia, xenophobia, capitalism, homophobia, transphobia, and many intersecting systems of oppression that continue to exploit and harm our communities. These are not just historical harms as we are seeing in the current day. Safety is deeply personal. Safety also garners strength from communities. Traditionally, safety planning has been specific to creating a plan which consists of a set of steps to reduce the risk of harm in unsafe situations with an abuser. This is what is traditionally done in DV organizations. While this aspect of safety planning is something that we have expanded on, and we try to envision and understand and plan for safety beyond individual physical safety. And we have developed a toolkit called Keeping Us Safe, Centering Autonomy and Care in Planning Our Safety. And that's available on our website. You can download it. But it really goes beyond also, and this is something that as an organization we're really trying to move towards, is beyond carceral systems of responses to violence and harm, and to find other sources of support. We have all heard by now that how healing is not linear, and it shows up in different ways, in the ways that DVRP creates programs to support clients. For example, we don't have an end date to provide support to clients. Many organizations, you go there, they're like, okay, we can help you for 6 months and then you're on your own. Whereas the DVRP folks come back to us after several years for additional support, and we're there for them. For the past 4 years, we've shifted our work to focus on different modalities of healing, and have created our Roots of Resistance program, which helps individuals build strength and resilience and balance in their lives through individual and group support systems, somatic healing workshops, including energy healing, and queer care circles, in which participants use and art-based activities and peer support. DVRP has been using the framework of healing justice, as you had mentioned, in our work over the past decade. This is a framework that was created by Black and Brown organizers at Kindred Southern Healing Justice Collective, and it was created to seek to address systemic violence and trauma experienced by oppressed communities. And it emphasizes collective care, resilience, and the need for holistic approaches that go beyond common Western methods. Over the past 7 years, we've been hosting regular healing spaces workshops led by certify API practitioners of specific forms of cultural healing of the arts, such as Qigong, sound bath healing, and other modalities. Last year, we hosted Lotus Renewal, our first ever all-day event grounded in healing justice for an organization that serves the Pan-Asian diaspora. Practicing healing justice goes beyond responses to domestic violence. It is also about the deep collective wounds from displacement, war, genocide, and other traumas that many of us may carry. We also recognize that movement building work needs to not only include, but to be led by survivors, including those who access our services and those who know their communities the best. Our peer organizer cohort, we've created a peer organizer program recently, and it is a 2-year program, and it's something that we had developed a couple of years ago and are continuing to do so now. It includes 10 members who are together for 2 years to skill up in DVRP's anti-violence training and develop their leadership skills through various projects in their communities. The goal of the program is to disrupt the traditional service model and center survivors and community members as experts in anti-violence work. Through programs like these, we are ensuring safety in our community collectively and together.
Great. Thank you so much, Krittika, for giving us a detailed overview of your very transformative programming that is survivor-led. Very much appreciate hearing about that. Anne, I'll turn to you next and ask, CAPAW is all about creating leadership pathways for APIA women. And we recognize that leadership takes on different forms depending on cultural, generational, and socioeconomic contexts. And as I mentioned in our own Thrive as They Lead report that focused on specific challenges that Black nonprofit leaders confront in this region, we surfaced a number of persistent inequities from unrealistic expectations to daily microaggressions to significant disparities in pay, promotions, rewards, and recognition. And I know you mentioned some of the very specific leadership challenges that you see APIA women facing, and curious if you could speak a little bit more to that and the kinds of support that really make a difference, and the kind of support and work that CAPAW is doing in this space.
Absolutely. And by the way, I was just thinking that I need to talk to Krittika offline here we need to talk about some of the work that you're doing. I'm really interested. So everybody, you know what, for the number of years, we're in 2025, and I hate to say this, but we're still facing the same issues. You can, call it DEI, you can repackage it. It really doesn't matter, because for me, it is not about the title or the name. The issues are still the issues, which is that our women do not have somebody at the beginning of career, especially they call it the broken rung, that beginning of career. They do not have the network. They do not have the mentors. They don't have somebody telling them how things work, whether it's in corporate America, government, or other spaces. They don't have somebody reaching down to them and saying, hey, you need to really think about these things. Here's how you navigate politically. Here's how how you need to think about how you show up at a meeting, and being very practical, coaching about how you show up and build your brand. It takes longer for Asian women, and I can't even, talk about the NHMPI community and how long that takes to get to that first step up as a leader. So it takes longer for our women to step up because they don't even know they can do it. Because guess what? We have to check all 100% of the items and the skill sets before we'll say, yes, we're qualified, where a Caucasian man will come in and go, oh, I hit 560. I'm good. I'm qualified. And so at the end of the day, we are very hard on ourselves, right? And how we step up. So we need people to say, you can do this. You can do this. My first mentor was actually a vice president who was a Caucasian male who helped me understand the political landscape and how to navigate and how to show up. And he was very much coaching me. And that was so critical. I've had many, many mentors, whether it's in corporate, nonprofit, or in other spaces, who, if I made a mistake, they told me. Otherwise, you step in a landmine and you have no clue you stepped in it. People just don't tell you. Okay? So you're just operating like you think everything is fine, and it is not. So hard work, everybody, keeping your head down and doing hard work is not necessarily going to get you where you need to go. And wealth building, it's fine if you want to be an individual contributor in a corporation. Maybe you're an entrepreneur or whatnot. But the bottom line is, unless you step into leadership many times in corporate America, you are capped with your salary. Okay, so I want you guys to think about, instead of saying no to yourself, you have to say yes to yourself, which is one of our challenges. Very critical, all that voice from our parents, and the fact that we should be grateful for what we have. We shouldn't ask for more. Why, don't make waves, right? And I had to learn to make strategic waves. So I want you guys to think about that as we think about, what are we telling our young women that are up and coming, or leaders, or, individuals. It could be anyone who really, from our cultures, that, and by the way, we are not a monolith, right? So I've been called so many times if I was Chinese, and I'm not, I'm Korean, but please at least ask, right? So, and then I've gotten so mixed up with another Asian female. I got so many times called by her name and she by mine. So these are the things that happen in the workplace. And I know this is not new for all of you, but it's real. That we really need to think about, how do we assert ourselves and stand out as individual leaders. So that, I'm going to pause there, but I could go on about that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sue Ann. And could you speak a little bit to CAPAW's programming around leadership development?
Yes, so we are all about addressing the whole person, not just career. Career is a part of you, but we're thinking more about things like, what is your life purpose? So we have a program called the Asian Pacific American Women's Leadership Institute. It is all about, what do you need to do to ensure that you are developing all parts of yourself inside out, to be confident, to then be able to make those decisions for yourself. You define what success means, right? So that's almost like an 8-month program with a community project piece. So you have to positively impact 25 or more people in community, which is somewhat what I heard with Krittika, with some of her programs. There's a community element to it. The second thing was the Shiro program, or it's called Unleash the Shiro in You. And I created that program out of our experience at the Atlanta spa shootings. So that week, I was literally marching with the community, and I got a call from a sponsor who says, we know you're doing work in the Asian women's space. What can you do to create solidarity around, the different cultures? So I literally wrote a program over the weekend. And I said, let's launch this, but I'm going to target that early career first 5 years. And I raise all the money for that, and I do not charge for that program, because when you're early career and have a little bit extra money, I don't think you're going to be going, oh, let's go to a leadership development program. That's not where you're going to spend your money, right? So I said, let's try to provide that experience for free. What can we do to give them a leg up, to be able to then go through this experience, and then even negotiating your own salary, asking for that promotion? That's the practicality, I hope. Whatever you want to do, or changing sectors. Oh, this is not what I really want to do. So I want everybody to have the confidence to be in the driver's seat. We also have a mentoring program and a circle for those who may not be ready for a full-on cohort experience. So we have a circle that meet once a month, and they talk about whatever the issues are that they want to talk about. This time tonight, actually, we're going to talk about AI. Like, I need some help there, because, I am not a ChatGPT expert. So we tackle on different issues that affect these incredible individuals who want to do things, but maybe they just don't have that confidence. And by the way, one last thing, 30th anniversary this year, San Francisco, Hotel Nico, we're having a conference September 4th through the 6th, which is why I want to talk to Krithika.
Actually, Suan, can I just add something based on what you were saying? It's a lot of similarities to some of the work that we're doing at DVRP when it comes to building capacity of survivors, right? One of the biggest challenges is how they are the barriers they face in the work market, the job force, especially coming from other countries. Not their
Absolutely.
qualifications are not viewed as being legitimate, or they have to start from scratch, and they don't have American experience. So
Hmm.
we have created programming called Economic Empowerment Program, which is kind of helping them navigate that through also support from mentors that we have developed relationships with. So it would be lovely to chat about that.
I would love to.
Yeah. So
I
I
would
think
love
what you mentioned was, the barriers that, immigrant women face are even, I would say, doubled when it comes to a survivor who's in that DV situation, because that person is experiencing violence at home, trying to get out of that situation, also rebuilding their capacity to be financially independent, and it impacts everybody, regardless of, even though DVRP, we mostly serve limited English proficient survivors and folks who are most marginalized in our communities. But I can say that as somebody who has gone through the system myself, and this was in a different country, it was in Canada, where I moved with 10 years work experience, a master's degree. And after my experience of violence, I had to start all over again, my career. I was doing internships, after having 10 years of work experience. So, and this is with a lot of privilege, having language access, having, a degree to back me up. So when I see what our clients are going through in so many different ways and the barriers they're experiencing, it's multiplied by all of the different identities, but also right now with what they're experiencing in an environment that is where the systems themselves are not made for us right now. You're pushing in so many different ways. So yeah,
Right.
thanks for sharing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And when you're going through trauma, I don't think leadership development is what you're thinking about either. So there's a lot going on in that space.
Thank you both so much. And what you both shared really, I think, underscores the importance of the long-term commitments that you're making to the communities that you're serving. So thank you both. And thank you, Kritika, for sharing your own experience. And I guess on that note, before I go to the next question to Kritika, I wanted to just remind folks in the audience to please feel free to put questions in the Q&A as we go along, and we'll get to those at the end. So Krittika, you touched on this about working across cultural and language diversity to reach people who may not see domestic violence as something that can be even named, and particularly in systems that were not designed to be culturally and linguistically sensitive to support the range of survivors, particularly in immigrant communities. So can you talk a little bit about what does it take to build trust across the spectrum of APIA communities and within these systems that weren't designed for us or any communities of color?
Thank you. So, when I first started doing this work, which was about over 20 years ago, it used to be that domestic violence was a term that was taboo in our communities. At this moment in history, unfortunately, the term which we are more using in the work, which is gender-based violence, which is used in our movements, is no longer actually allowed to be used if you receive federal funding. So this is really alarming, as the barriers we are experiencing in our work are even further expanded through these. Over the past decade at DVRP, we have been building with our community members through our programs that both look at root causes of violence and ways of responding through healing. We have been sharing our frameworks at various spaces, such as state coalitions, national coalitions, such as SOAR, and even with our funders. We have started doing and sharing research within our communities, as folks might know that research in the API community is very limited, especially when it comes to women's and gender issues. We recently published a report called Cultural Perspectives on Mental Health, a study of DC's API community, and have been using it to provide training to service providers on how to address the needs of API survivors and how we view mental health. Tonight, we're hosting a healing space workshop in our office called Weaving Resistance at World Pride, which centers queer and trans folks, but is open to everyone in the community and uses hands-on art making through woodblock printing on saris. We're expecting folks who attend all of our other programs to show up for this. So relationship building, it takes time. It's not just something that happens through us providing a one-time service or training. Think of how we build relationships and friendships in our own personal lives. In similar ways, DVRP not only provides support through case management, as most gender-based violence organizations do, but we create spaces where we can co-create together. Our programs are also developed through input by our clients themselves. We host listening sessions with them, which are kind of like focus groups, to find out their needs on specific issue areas and have developed programming to address these needs. I mentioned before the Economic Empowerment Program. That's our newest program that was developed through feedback from these listening sessions. So, these are different ways in which, we respond to and create relationships within our communities to address the needs of our diverse communities.
Yeah, thank you so much, Krittika, and just for really reminding us the power of relational connection in these times when erasure, even around the language that we use to describe our experiences, is being taken away. Thank you. Suan, to you, a next question. CAPAW focuses on leadership that's community rooted and culturally grounded. Can you talk about what that looks like in practice, especially across multiple generations and diverse identities within the APIA community, like you talked about earlier?
Yeah, I mean, when I think about the participants, I think about where their heritage is. We always start with, we do a lot of exercise. We have something called culture in a bag, where we actually literally start with talking about that person's, whether it's their personal identity or family, their culture, heritage. And it's a very meaningful way to get to know someone as an individual person and a human, right? Before we talk about all our titles and everything else. But I think that's important that we take the time to make sure that our participants are seen for who they are and heard. And it's interesting to watch them evolve over that period of time where they're going through the program, connecting with one another. We have had people talk about their trauma for the first time in our cohort as well. It bubbles up. And the fact that, at the end of the day, it is important to really acknowledge those things that are very hard for us to address. It could be racism at work. It could be even not being accepted by their own family or, other things that really affect their ability to be the best selves, right? And trauma is not going to give you the best self, right, Krittika? That doesn't give you the platform to be your best self. So I think it's a lot of what do we need to do to provide that support. And we'll do things like, mind-body connection, which, by the way, I've done so many leadership experiences being in corporate. And that's all about the mind. And it's all about, all about the skills development, emotional intelligence. But when do you ever talk about how your ethnicity or your background affects your lens as a leader? That would be, I can't remember any corporation that does that. And it affects you. It affects you in the way you lead, the decisions you make, whether you show up at a, after 5, networking event at a bar, right? Based on your beliefs. You may not have time to do that when you're taking care of your kids, your mother's living with you, all these expectations to move up in an organization, but you have other things, other priorities, and your culture, it's an expectation. So I think those are the types of things we address, and how do we, provide support and skills necessary to navigate through these things. And so I think that's huge. When I talk about, let me define whole person the way we define it. And by the way, everyone, this is not the definition, but it is ours. which is intellectual, relational, financial, physical/nutrition, and cultural. There are other aspects of us. I know that, there are other aspects, but those are the things that we find are important when we talk about development of our cohort. So I think that's important to us to always stay true to the fact that those are the things we're going to focus on. When we talk about, if your finances are out of whack and you're struggling, you're going to have, or, put food on the table. If you're not going to do other things. There is no resource for other things. So these are the things that we really do delve into. So hopefully that's helpful. But that's important to us, is whole person.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sue-Ann. Really appreciate you talking about those 5 different aspects and really getting out of simply only the analytical, in deconstructing and dealing and addressing oppression and trauma that shows up in our body. So appreciate, Krittika, you too, speaking of somatic practices as well. So important. I'm going to pose one more question to both of you, but before that, just another reminder. I'm seeing some questions populating in the chat, so please, folks who are attendees, feel free to continue placing questions in the chat, and we'll move there right after this final question. So I'll go back to Krittika and ask about, as we look to invest in the next generation of APIA women and girls, what do you think is one thing that really needs to change, whether it's in philanthropy, policy, education, or movement spaces?
Thank you. It's an interesting question. And I thought about it from the 2 perspectives. One is the philanthropy, because you are a foundation, and we are a lucky recipient of your funds in the past, a Washington Area Women's Foundation. And I will say that at this moment, more than ever, we need folks to step up when it comes to philanthropy and not create more barriers to funding, and fund those in marginalized communities who would not get the organizations like us who are probably going to choose to rethink whether we would apply for federal funding in the current moment, and how do we stay afloat. But also, I will give props to the Washington Area Women Foundation. We're no longer funded by you, but my props to you is that when we were funded, you found different methods of ensuring that grantees shared their work. I didn't have to sit there writing a 15-page report like we have to for other funders, and have to put my time into that. But I rather had a conversation with my grant officer who took the notes, and I was so appreciative of that. And also, it was like a conversation which is much more interpersonal. So that's great. But this is the moment to really step up for foundations and philanthropy, and also for individual donors. To think about putting your support for organizations that are really doing this work on in our communities. And I also think that when it comes to movement spaces, I think the work has to be intergenerational. A lot of times we think about the next generation, but we also need to look at when I was a younger organizer in my 20s, I looked to build with my aunties and folks in the movement, who came with wisdom, but who also in many cases were not, were devalued for being, older API women who didn't speak English or had all these, other challenges. And I really think that we need to rethink the way that in which we are doing movement building work to ensure that those with lived experiences are at the forefront. So that's what I would say to take away.
Great. Thank you so much, Krittika. And Sue-Ann, I'd love to pose the same question to you about one thing that you believe must change, whether in philanthropy, policy, education, or movement spaces.
So I was thinking about the perception of AAPIs as a whole. So if you look at the data, like with the data disaggregation is really huge, and I feel like we're going backwards in this space. But anyway, when I was thinking about, as an example, even salary, if you aggregate all the AAPIs together, we look like we're doing well, But if you disaggregate the data, there are certain groups that are doing well, and then there's a huge gap, and then there's this group that's completely struggling. Fijian, Bhutanese, all the Laotia, all these groups that have very low income, they're frontline, And guess what? In order to do some of the things that we need to do to help support, they need support, right? So they need, like, if I don't have childcare, I'm not going to go get a degree. I can't afford to do that. But if I am, supported in some way, or, I have free programs, I can go online, it's a little easier, right? So I think these are some of the things that we need to think about is what do we need to do to provide that support. My parents planned, they actually were probably very privileged in terms of they planned well for their retirement and they were actually able to get senior living care. Now, many of our sisters and brothers don't have that privilege. I still had so much to do even with that support. I still had a lot to do. Imagine if that was your full-time work plus that, plus if you had kids. So what do we need to do to support these communities, right? And then on top of that, I was thinking about what Krittika said. If you're an immigrant, you're undocumented on top, you just don't have a chance. It's just there's so many challenges. So I would say the things that we need is what do we need to do to support these women, disaggregating the data, getting the resources where they need to be, and talking to our policymakers about what is it that we need. And by the way, I was in Washington, D.C. during, the mid-May with National Asian Chamber. This is the first time I didn't even know what to ask. I was like, with everything going on, with the chaos of all of these things, I had to ask our congressman, I'm like, help me understand what's the priority and how does it help our community? It was just all over the place, right? It's the first time I couldn't get a grasp on what is it that they're all working towards. And so sometimes I think it's a matter of like showing up as a community with your congressman, congresswoman, whether it's, locally. And then I would also say we probably need to have people run for office that are representing our community. So those are the things that I think about: data disaggregation, running for office, talking to your congressman. By the way, it took me like 5 times to feel actually comfortable. Like, do I belong here? I went through the whole, like, what do I know about policy and what am I, but I tell you what, they want to hear from us. And, other communities do a great job of showing up better than the AAPI community, I have to say. So those are some of the things that I would say that we need to do right now.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sue Ann. And I think that advocacy piece in particular is a really important way to center the lived experience as well in those conversations. I really appreciate you both highlighting some really important takeaways around trust-based philanthropy principles for foundations to adopt, which I know we're very committed to here at the Women's Foundation, and really, again, centering lived experience in both how we cultivate leadership, how we serve our communities, how we advocate with policymakers, disaggregating the data within our communities, such an important point. The disparities within our own APIA populations are so vast, and it's so critical to keep that front and center. The intergenerational piece, Sue Ann, that you talked about, I think is also just so important and shows up a lot in our communities. Thank you both so much for this and for your tremendous insights. And I do want to give our participants an opportunity to be able to ask you questions as well. So we'll turn to that portion of the webinar now. And we have one question here in the chat. So I'll pose that to both of you. And whoever would like to go first, feel free. So as organizations, we have a question here from Danielle Reyes. Thank you. As organizations serving gender and identity-based communities, are you experiencing pushback or a loss of funding from past sponsors and corporate funders in particular?
I can take a stab and so please hop on after. So yeah, I think most gender-based violence serving organizations are experiencing a lot of pushback right now. A large number of our organizations receive funding from the government, whether it's a state, federal, local, and the federal ones are the most challenging because these are the ones that are coming with strings attached. In the new upcoming kind of like our request for proposals for grants that we have previously applied for and received, they have indicated that we can only serve U.S. citizens and green card holders. They have indicated that there is no that we cannot use strategies that look into the root causes of violence, but rather it has to be a criminal justice kind of a response to violence. What is the so like train the police officers, rather than like looking at why harm occurs and responding to that, and so many more kind of barriers. So it is definitely currently challenging. Many of my colleagues' organizations have lost funding for work around human trafficking, around anti-Asian violence, critical issues in our communities that are not going anywhere. They're in fact increasing as we go along. So we are at my organization having internal conversations on how do we pivot at this point. We are very dependent on grant funding uh, from the government, but more, I mean, we have a kind of a combination of like state, local, and federal grants. And yeah, like I think this is a moment for many of our organizations to make some challenging decisions on how do we stay true to our values, considering what is being asked of us by some of these funders. So this is something that we are dealing with internally, and we're also trying to pivot to more foundation grants as well as other forms of funding, which we're competing with all the whole sector on right now. So it's a yeah, unfortunate place to be. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Krittika. I know it's an immense challenge, and to remain aligned with your values as you seek funding. So thank you for sharing that. Sue-Ann, please.
So yes, we are impacted by funding, but we don't take federal funding. So we're primarily corporate, foundation, and then individual giving. So we've never really taken government funding, which probably actually is helping us. From a corporate perspective, I've had both. I've had companies who have actually increased based on what we're doing. And then I've had companies who said we can't do it because we've basically paused on all community funding. And they've also said, I've been coached on, so I've talked to all different kind of companies, do presentations, and they said that they were uncomfortable with a word like microaggression. They didn't like that. So when I was speaking, I had to repackage that to something else. Okay, again, doesn't go away just because, we don't say it that way. And then I also was coached that we had to change, like every year I would do a Women of Color conference, in March during Women's History Month. And they're like, might want to rethink the name. I'm like, okay, and so I'm getting coached on these different vernacular about what's acceptable or not, because now companies, and I won't say which company, I've had visits with CEOs. I've had visits, sit down visits, and, talked about what are they continuing to do for the community? What are ways that are they pulling back funding, or is it kind of being repackaged and integrated? A lot of them are saying they're integrating into the business lines so that it's not just a separate entity, like their DEI effort is not a separate entity, but it's getting integrated into the business area so it doesn't show up as, quote, DEI. I have also other funders who are saying, hey, we know we're a target right now in terms of like Robbie Starbuck and what he's going around and all these different companies that are, quote, too woke or whatever. I mean, whatever the vernacular, we're definitely getting coached. And the other thing that I was told was that I have to go through my website and like make sure my language is appropriate, because now some of the companies are going through, when they're doing granting, they're going through the website to see what the language looks like and whether or not they can support that or not. So they almost have like a checklist. So I like these are examples of what we're addressing right now. This is what I'm dealing with personally. I don't know about Krittika, but I am dealing personally with all of these kinds of things. But at the same time, like I said, I have companies who are also stepping up. So the key thing is, how do your language and the value that your organization brings, how does it align with the strategic intent of their efforts for the company? How does it help them? A lot of them are very focused on business expansion, banks, as an example. They're like, well, how do you help me break into a new market, in San Francisco, like as an example, where we're doing the conference? Like, how does that help us? So they're very business focused on how does it help them expand their market. And you have to be able to language things in a way that resonates with corporate America. That's what I'm most familiar with. So that's what I'm going to talk about. But does that help?
That's great. Thank you so much, Suann, to really drill down to that level of detail around the strategic alignment with the intent of the corporate sponsor that we're approaching. And then on the flip side of it, seeing that there are corporations who are mirroring what the government is doing, even if they, perhaps won't face consequences for continuing to support our communities. And that's hard to see.
And by the way, no may be the answer. Maybe there are certain companies you don't want to partner with.
Right.
Because you don't have the same values. And we've had to say no before, which is very hard for me. But, it's like, turn away 100,000. Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, we have had to do the same, where we have received funds from organizations that we've then realized was not values aligned, and we had to say no, and that's hard, very hard. But I sleep better at night knowing that we're not like in bed with the devil. So, but yeah, these are some really challenging decisions that our organizations are making right now, all of us in different stages of that. Yeah. How, because some of these, like if fall, like it's great that Suan, your organization doesn't take government funding, and I'm hoping that eventually our organization will be at that level. But like I said, most nonprofit DV organizations have some level of funding from the government, no matter where whether it may not be federal, but and everything creeps down. Like even for some of the state grants, where I noticed in the RFP, one of them very subtly had like, will not support DEI programs. I'm like, what does that mean? What do you even mean by
There's
that?
no common definition, right, Chris?
Yeah.
What
Is that? What is
is
that?
the definition? It's like whatever.
Yeah.
Um,
So we have been counting a lot more on some of our community sources of support, through the last couple of months. So an example is a former staff member who got married and asked everybody to donate to DVRP instead of giving them any other gifts, which was so lovely, And then I see that we have a board member here in the audience, Alyssa. She very kindly did a Lunar New Year fundraiser at her house for DVRP, where she invited like 30 of her friends, asked folks to donate, and we also got to meet them. We didn't, these were not part of our community. So it was building that relationship, So it's almost like you got to look, we've been looking within our communities for support during these times, and they are showing up in these ways. So, yeah. So, yeah.
That's really beautiful. Thank you for sharing, Krittika. And it's, yeah, I think it just, as we all know, the funding is tied to relationships at all levels. So thank you
I
so
have a
much.
question for Krittika, actually. Were you getting funding from VAWA?
We get WAWA funding on a state level.
Okay.
So actually, while we were in this meeting, I got an email saying we are continuing, reapplied for that state funding, and we are getting it. It's not so many strings attached compared to the federal WAWA, so we're a bit relieved. So it's good. We don't know how much it is yet, but at least it's there. So yeah, like when we are planning for the future, it's a little like wiggly right now, not knowing what to expect. So that's challenging.
Key words, everybody: wiggly and pivoting. Like that's all we're doing right now.
Correct.
Absolutely. I'm not seeing any more questions here from the audience, but I'm going to just squeeze in one more question before we have to conclude for the day and ask, I know you both touched on this a bit, but if you could speak to specifically to the anti-Asian rhetoric and policy that we're seeing an escalation in this moment, and just how that in particular has impacted the communities that you serve? Either of you feel free.
So I think, we saw a definite escalation during the COVID, right? Where we saw huge escalation of anti-Asian violence due to racist rhetoric of the roots of COVID. But now, a recent survey by API Hate actually shows that 62% of API adults feel that there'll be an increase in hostility towards immigrants, and that anti-Asian hate crimes will increase under the current administration. The survey took place in January, and I'm sure that numbers may increase at this point. When it comes to survivors of gender-based violence, many are afraid to report or even call us. To service providers because they're afraid that they may be further penalized due to their immigration status. And unfortunately, that is actually a reality. Previously, we could say like, no, we serve everybody, and and you can say that if you're getting multiple sources of funding, but for many organizations that may not be the case, And so, as service providers, we're also struggling with the barriers that certain sources of funding have put on us. So, in order to get through this, we need community members to invest in organizations that are providing these critical services. We also need to not close our eyes and hope things will go away, because I feel like that shows the differences within our communities. We know that the diversity in our communities, including the fact that we have a huge class divide within our API communities, and we need to collectively mobilize and prioritize the well-being of our communities. If you're not already involved with and care, but care about gender-based violence issues specifically, there are spaces to get involved, including with SOAR's work. SOAR, SOAR. It's a coalition of national, specifically South Asian organizations, but there are also local API organizations that you could reach out to, like DVRP. Create spaces where you can invite, local organizations to come in and talk about their work and share this in your community. So I think that, I think that there needs to be a response by everybody in some way, not just through our work in our 9 to 5, but in our everyday lived experiences of being.
So, when I look at I love Stop API Hate, to your point, Krittika. I think that, FBI data shows substantial rise in anti-Asian hate crimes. So they increased from 158 in 2019 to 746 in 2021. And then there was a decrease in 22 to 499. But listen, you guys, I actually experienced this on the MARTA in Atlanta when I actually was coming back from a leadership conference, believe it or not. And this gentleman, I'm going to use that term loosely, came on the train and started harassing me and giving me a hard time, calling me Chinese. And he started like checking out, like, I know you're Chinese and blah. And I'm thinking, does he have mental issues? That was my first thought. And so that's not going to be logical. I was a little bit afraid to do anything, but I finally said, you need to step away and you need to stop touching me or getting anywhere near me. And then he and I kind of got into it a little bit, but I was like, if he starts to give me a hard time physically, I think I'm going to have to take my suitcase and I think I'm going to have to shove him out of the train. And I literally was going through my mind, what am I going to do? Because everybody turned their heads. And that's pretty common, you guys. Everybody kind of don't want to be involved because they're afraid. And then after he stepped off at the next station, the lady next to me was like, I'm so sorry you have to endure that. I'm thinking, thank you for your help. Right? So to me, it is also about how do you appropriately handle it, because this person may have mental challenges or you don't know what you're dealing with. So you have to really think through that. So situational awareness training, OCA, national, they provide that as an example. So getting yourself educated in this space of situational awareness training is a good example of how you can prepare yourself. How do you appropriately and safely intervene as an example? So to me, I think getting yourself educated is important because you never know where you're going to see it. I'm like, I can't be leading a women's organization and just sit here and do nothing. That's all these things happened like within 10 seconds in my head. So that's the practicality of what I think about when I think about anti-Asian hate, and what do we have to do to prepare? Because it will happen.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Sue Ann, for sharing that. And, and I think it just really underscores that the political climate and what we're hearing from our elected officials really does trickle down to inform what that individual and interpersonal violence looks like. And that's the source of it, really. Yeah, thank you both so much for sharing specifically how the escalation in the rhetoric and policy is impacting our communities on so many levels. And I know there were some organizations that were mentioned. So just to repeat, South Asian SOAR, OCA, and Stop AAPI Hate were some of the organizations that were mentioned by our panelists. So I know we're at time, and that's all the time we have for today. And I just really want to thank you again, Krittika and Sue Ann, not just for what you do, but for the way that you show up and that you lead. And we really hope that today's forum helped increase the visibility of the critical work that you're doing to new audiences and to longtime supporters. And thank you to everyone here who joined us as attendees. If today's conversation resonated with you, providing clarity or a sense of shared purpose, we really encourage you to carry that forward by learning more about the work of these leaders and their organizations, and really discuss with your network what resonated from today's discussion. And of course, if you are in a position to give to support the work of the Women's Foundation or the communities that we discussed, we encourage you to make a donation at thewomensfoundation.org/askher, and of course, to make donations to CAPAW and APIA-DVRP. Thank you again for being part of today's discussion, and we hope to see you at our next Ask Her webinar.